Today, we live in a society where there is a healthy fear that the government has become increasingly abusive and intrusive in the lives of normal Americans, violating civil liberties along the way. Defined by Merriam-Webster as freedom from arbitrary governmental interference, as with the right of free speech, specifically by denial of governmental power, and in the United States especially as guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, civil liberties are incredibly important. Social justice, or the ability of a person to freely achieve their potential without unnecessary interference, depends on the government respecting civil liberties. Since the post-Civil War era, and especially in recent years, the government has periodically used its power to deprive its citizens of their civil liberties. The most obvious recent abuse of government policy involves the National Security Act prison spying scandal. According to files leaked by Edward Snowden, NSA is able to obtain massive amounts of information stored by major US-based tech companies. They also intercept a large amount of data from the world's phone and internet networks without warrants as well. While regulations within the NSA are in place to protect personal information within the data collected, NSA internal auditors found that agents broke these privacy rules nearly 1,000 times a year. It is easy to think that such breaches are a new trend, but the violation of civil liberties is hardly limited to recent years. The United States government has a long history of questionable behavior. Through the late 19th and into the early 20th century, the federal government has denied its citizens of rights to placate the public. An apparent example of this is the Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow laws were a group of laws that forcibly segregated black people. One notable example is the Plessy v. Ferguson case, in which the Supreme Court declared laws that denied black Americans the same treatment under the law as white Americans. Civil liberties would come in the form of the Red Scare that occurred during the 1920s. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, many upper-class Americans were worried of the possible spread of communism to the United States. So these upper-class Americans tried to create mass hysteria about the possibility. Even though the actual number of communists in the country amounted to less than 1% of the total population, this did not stop the fear of communism from spreading throughout the government. As a result, many people who were merely suspected of communism found themselves subject to a number of misdemeanors. One such case was in 1919 when a series of bomb explosions scared the public. Attorney General Mitchell Palmer led a campaign against communists, which led to the arrest of 6,000 people without reasonable cause. Another, more serious example was the arrest of Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, who were both known anarchists. They were tried and convicted of robbery, even though the evidence was circumstantial at best. After 7 years, both were executed. The late 20th century was filled with just as many civil liberty violations of targeted groups as years prior. After Pearl Harbor, paranoia was common in the nation. Reminiscent of the fright experienced during the Red Scare, a new anti-Japanese ideology took hold. Similar to other civil liberty violations, certain minority groups faced more discrimination than others. Commonly held stereotypes paired with the need for a scapegoat bred a frenzy of fear not unlike other situations in which violation was the result. Executive Order 9066, issued by FDR, ordered the military to disregard Japanese Americans' constitutional rights in the name of national security. Such free license, combined with intense national fear, gave way to one of the more blatant abuses of protected civil liberties in modern American history. Japanese internment camps were the major outcome of this executive order. Nothing more than a glorified prison in the western United States, these camps were deemed a military necessity. With no proof of espionage, the United States government demanded the relocation of over 120,000 U.S. citizens of Japanese descent, about half of whom were children. Forced to abandon their homes, jobs, and property, these citizens were placed under the watchful eye of the U.S. government. 10 camps were created, and citizens were kept for up to 4 years. Deaths, either from emotional strain, lack of medical care, or even beatings due to insubordination, were not unheard of. American government leaders fueled wartime hysteria and racial prejudice by wrongly incarcerating 120,000 individuals. Revoking their rights to property, a fair trial, assembly, and so many others, the federal government ruined the lives of many and showcased just what it is willing to do in the name of security. In more recent years, the government paid restitution payments for those incarcerated and their descendants. The government might not be able to atone for these abuses, but it did accept blame, apologize, and attempt to step in the right direction. The federal government is supposed to protect the civil liberties of its citizens. Impartiality is incredibly important to achieving this goal. From the Red Scare to the NSA scandal and everything in between, popular opinion clearly affects legislation. Citizens must keep their government in check. Society is able to avoid events such as Japanese internment if citizens pay careful attention to what is going on in their government. Without the attention of citizens, governmental civil liberty abuses can run rampant. It is the job of the people to watch for signs and show no fear in the face of violations. Through acknowledging past mistakes, it becomes easier to avoid future abuses.